The grocery store on Maple Street was nearly empty at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like tired insects. Most of the checkers had gone home, leaving only 2 lanes open and a handful of customers pushing carts through aisles that seemed too bright for the hour. Nicole Tanner stood in front of the canned goods, her 4-year-old daughter Gracie balanced on her hip, trying to do math in her head. She had $23 in her wallet, all that was left after rent and utilities and the car payment that had cleaned out her account 3 days ago. $23 to last until Friday, when her next paycheck would hit. 4 days. 4 days of meals for herself and Gracie. 4 days of gas to get to work. 4 days of pretending everything was fine. The can of chicken noodle soup cost $1.49. The bread was $2.29. The peanut butter, Gracie's favorite, the only thing she'd eat some days, was $3.99. Nicole added and subtracted, calculated and recalculated, trying to make the numbers work. They wouldn't work. They never worked. Gracie squirmed in her arms, reaching for the bright packaging on the lower shelf. "Mommy, can we get the crackers? The fish ones?" "Not today, sweetheart." Nicole's voice was steady, practiced. She'd gotten good at saying no without breaking, at keeping the desperation out of her tone. "Maybe next time." "You always say next time." Gracie's lower lip trembled, and Nicole felt her heart crack along fault lines that had been forming for months. "I know, baby, I know." She put the peanut butter back on the shelf. Too expensive. She'd find something else, something cheaper. Maybe the store brand, if they had it. Maybe nothing at all. She was reaching for a can of beans when she heard the voices. They came from the next aisle over. Male voices, low and rough. The kind of voices that made Nicole's shoulders tense and her grip tighten on Gracie without conscious thought. She'd learned to recognize danger in the years since Gracie's father had left, had developed instincts that kept her awake at night and alert during the day. "Told you she'd be here." The voice was thick, slurred slightly. "Same time every week. Predictable. Just grab her and go. Don't make a scene." Nicole's blood went cold. She knew that voice. The second one. The one giving orders. She knew it the way you know a nightmare that keeps coming back, the way you know the sound of a door you hoped would never open again. Derek, Gracie's father, the man she'd fled 2 years ago, after the bruises stopped being accidents and started being warnings. The man who'd promised to find her, to make her pay for leaving, to take Gracie back no matter what any court said. He'd found her. Nicole's mind raced. The exit was at the front of the store, past the registers, past whoever Derek had brought with him. The back of the store might have an employee entrance, but she didn't know the layout, didn't know if it would be locked, didn't know if she could get there before they cut her off. She had seconds, maybe less. Gracie was looking up at her, sensing something wrong, her small face pinched with confusion. "Mommy?" "Shh, baby. We're going to play a game, okay? We're going to be very quiet and very fast." She moved down the aisle, away from the voices, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. At the end of the row, she paused, peering around the corner toward the front of the store. 2 men stood near the exit. One was Derek. She'd recognize him anywhere, even after 2 years, even in the fluorescent glare of a grocery store at night. He was bigger than she remembered, harder, his face carrying a meanness that had always been there but was no longer hidden. The other man was a stranger, heavyset and bald, watching the aisles with the practiced patience of someone who'd done this before. They were blocking the only way out. Nicole pulled back, her breath coming fast and shallow. She couldn't go forward. She couldn't go back. She was trapped in a grocery store with her daughter in her arms, and no one to help her. Think. The pharmacy was in the back corner. Maybe there was a phone, someone she could ask to call 911. But the pharmacy was closed, the metal gate pulled down over the counter. The restrooms were in the back too, but what good would that do? Lock herself in a bathroom and wait for them to break down the door. She was moving without a plan, just moving, trying to put distance between herself and the men at the front. She rounded another corner and nearly collided with someone. He was big. That was her first impression, tall and broad, filling the aisle in a way that made her step back instinctively. His gray hair was cropped short, his beard neatly trimmed, and he wore a leather jacket that creaked when he moved. His eyes were gray, too, the color of storm clouds, and they were looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. A biker. One of those motorcycle guys, the kind her mother had always warned her about, the kind you cross the street to avoid. Nicole opened her mouth to apologize, to excuse herself, to get away before this became another problem on top of the one she already had, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he was looking at her, not with threat, but with something that might have been concern. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the terror, the 2 years of running finally catching up with her. Maybe it was simply that she had nowhere else to turn and nothing left to lose. "Please," she whispered. The word came out broken, desperate. "Please, help us." The man's expression shifted. The distant politeness vanished, replaced by something sharper, more focused. His eyes moved from Nicole to Gracie, taking in the child's frightened face, the way Nicole was holding her like she might need to run at any moment. "What's wrong?" His voice was low, rough, but not unkind. "My ex, Gracie's father, he's here, at the front of the store with another man. He's not supposed to be anywhere near us. There's a restraining order, but he doesn't care, and he said he'd take her. He said he'd—" She was rambling, the words tumbling out faster than she could control them. The man held up a hand, and she stopped. "Where are they? The front?" "Near the exit. Blocking it. I can't get out. I don't know what to do. Okay." The word was calm, steady, an anchor in the storm of her panic. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here, in this aisle. Don't move, don't make noise. I'm going to take a look. But stay here." He said it like there was no other option, like the world would rearrange itself to make his words true. Then he turned and walked toward the front of the store, his boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Nicole pressed herself against the shelf. Gracie clutched to her chest. Her daughter was silent now, her face buried in Nicole's shoulder, small hands gripping her shirt like it was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid and strange. "It's okay," Nicole whispered, though she didn't believe it. "It's going to be okay." She heard voices, the stranger's low rumble, then Derek's sharp response. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the tone. Confusion, then anger, then something that might have been fear. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time had lost its meaning. Then the stranger was back, walking down the aisle toward her, and his expression had changed. The concern was still there, but it was joined by something harder, something that looked like purpose. "They're gone," he said. "Left through the front about 30 seconds ago. Got in a truck, headed east." Nicole sagged against the shelf, relief flooding through her so fast it made her dizzy. "Thank you. I don't know what you said to them, but thank you. I told them I was calling the police, that I had their license plate, and that if they didn't leave in the next 10 seconds, they'd regret it." His mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "They believed me. Will they come back?" The question hung in the air between them. The man was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes assessing. "Tonight? Probably not. Tomorrow? Next week?" He shook his head. "Men like that don't give up. They just wait." Nicole felt the relief curdle into something colder. He was right. She knew he was right. Derek had found her once. He would find her again. The restraining order was just paper. The police were always too slow, too skeptical, too convinced that she was exaggerating. She was alone in this, the way she'd been alone since the day she'd packed a bag in the middle of the night and driven 400 miles to start over. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Nicole. Nicole Tanner. This is Gracie. I'm Shepard." He crouched down so he was at Gracie's eye level, his movements slow and careful. "Hi, Gracie. That's a—" "Pretty name." Gracie peeked out from Nicole's shoulder, her eyes wide and uncertain. "Are you a bad guy?" "No, sweetheart. I'm one of the good guys." He straightened and looked at Nicole. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? Family? Friends?" No. We moved here 8 months ago. I don't really know anyone." The admission cost her something. Pride, maybe, or the illusion that she had her life under control. "We'll be fine. I'll call the police, file another report, and they'll tell you there's nothing they can do until he actually does something." Shepard's voice was flat, certain. "I've seen it before. Too many times." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, white, simple, with a phone number and a small logo. A horseman carrying a shepherd's crook. "If you need anything," he said, pressing the card into her hand. "Anything at all. You call that number. Someone will answer, day or night." Nicole looked at the card, then at him. "I don't understand. You don't know me. Why would you help?" "Because you asked." His gray eyes held hers. "Because you're scared and alone and trying to protect your daughter. Because that's enough reason for anyone with a conscience." He paused. "The world's full of people who walk past when they should stop. I'm not one of them." He turned and walked toward the front of the store, his leather jacket creaking with every step. At the end of the aisle, he stopped and looked back. Get home safe tonight, Nicole. Lock your doors, and call that number if anything happens, anything at all." Then he was gone, disappearing through the automatic doors into the night. Nicole stood in the canned goods aisle for a long time, the card clutched in her hand, Gracie's weight warm against her chest. Her groceries were forgotten. The math she'd been doing in her head was forgotten. Everything was forgotten except the terror that was slowly fading and the card that promised something she was afraid to believe in. Help. Real help. From a stranger in a leather jacket who had stopped when he could have walked past. She tucked the card into her pocket, picked up a few things she could afford, and went to the register. The cashier rang her up without comment, and Nicole paid with the crumpled bills from her wallet. Outside, the parking lot was dark and empty. She walked to her car with Gracie in her arms, checking every shadow, every corner, every space where someone could be hiding. The truck Derek had been driving was gone. The lot was quiet. She got in, locked the doors, and sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel. Then she pulled out the card and looked at it again. Iron Horseman MC, it said on the back. Nothing else. She didn't know what that meant. She didn't know who these people were or why a stranger would help her. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Derek would be back, and when he came, she would need more than a restraining order to stop him. She started the car and drove home, the card still in her hand, and somewhere across town, a man named Shepard was making a phone call. 3 days passed without incident. Nicole went to work at the dental office where she answered phones and filed insurance claims. She picked Gracie up from daycare at 5:30, made dinner from whatever was cheapest, and locked the doors before the sun went down. She checked the windows twice before bed and slept with her phone on the pillow beside her, the card from Shepard tucked into the case. She didn't call the number. She told herself she didn't need to, that Derek had been scared off, that the encounter at the grocery store had been enough to convince him to leave her alone. She told herself a lot of things in those 3 days, most of them lies designed to get her through the hours. On the fourth night, she woke to the sound of breaking glass. It came from the living room, the sharp, explosive crack of a window giving way, followed by the softer sounds of someone climbing through. Nicole was out of bed before she was fully awake, her body moving on instinct, honed by years of fear. She grabbed Gracie from the small bed in the corner of the room. Her daughter's room was supposed to be separate, but Nicole couldn't bear to have her out of reach, and ran for the bathroom. It was the only room in the apartment with a lock. A flimsy lock, the kind you could break with a credit card, but it was something. She closed the door, turned the lock, and pressed her back against the wall. Gracie clutched to her chest. "Mommy?" Gracie's voice was thick with sleep and fear. "What's happening?" "Shh, baby. Be very quiet." Footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate, the footsteps of someone who wasn't trying to hide. "Nicole?" Derek's voice, muffled by the door but unmistakable. "I know you're in there. Open up." Nicole's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. She pulled out the card, and dialed the number with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. It rang once, twice. "Iron Horseman, this is Red. Please help me." The words came out in a whisper, barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "He's in my apartment. He's going to—" The bathroom door shuddered. Derek's fist, hitting it from the other side. "Open the door, Nicole. I'm not playing around." "Where are you?" The voice on the phone was calm, steady, a lifeline in the chaos. "Address, now. Maple Creek Apartments, Building C, Unit 14. Please hurry, please." The door burst open. Derek stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. Behind him, Nicole could see the destruction he'd left in his wake. Furniture overturned, glass scattered across the carpet, the small life she'd built torn apart in minutes. "Thought you could hide from me?" He stepped into the bathroom, and Nicole pressed herself against the wall, shielding Gracie with her body. "Thought some biker could scare me off." "Derek, please, just leave us. Alone. I won't press charges. I won't tell anyone." "Shut up." He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising, and yanked her toward him. Gracie screamed, a high, terrified sound that seemed to fill the entire apartment. "You're coming with me, both of you. We're going to have a little talk about what happens when you try to run." Nicole fought. She kicked and scratched and bit. Every self-defense instinct she'd developed firing at once. But Derek was bigger, stronger, fueled by the kind of anger that didn't feel pain. He dragged her out of the bathroom, down the hall, toward the broken window he'd climbed through. And then the front door exploded inward, not opened, exploded. The frame splintered, the cheap wood giving way under the force of something heavy, and suddenly the apartment was full of men, big men, wearing leather, moving with the coordinated precision of people who had done this before. Derek let go of Nicole's arm, spinning toward the new threat. His face went white. What the hell? The first man through the door was Shepard. He moved like a force of nature, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides. His fist connected with Derek's jaw, and Derek went down, not unconscious but stunned, sprawling on the carpet amid the glass and debris. More men flooded in behind Shepard. They secured the apartment in seconds, checking rooms, blocking exits, forming a perimeter that Derek couldn't hope to break. One of them, young, with tattooed arms and a shaved head, knelt beside Nicole. "You okay?" His voice was surprisingly gentle. "You hurt anywhere?" I don't... Gracie, your daughter's fine. She's right here." He gestured, and Nicole saw Gracie in the arms of another biker, a woman with a long braid and kind eyes. The woman was speaking softly to her, stroking her hair, and Gracie, impossibly, had stopped screaming. "How?" Nicole couldn't form the question. Her brain wouldn't work, wouldn't process what was happening. 10 minutes ago, she'd been alone, trapped, certain that this was how her story ended. Now she was surrounded by strangers who had broken down her door to save her. Shepard walked back to where Derek lay on the floor. Derek was trying to get up, but Shepard put a boot on his chest and pushed him back down. "Stay there," Shepard said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was something underneath it that made the words sound like a death sentence. "The police are on their way. When they get here, you're going to confess to breaking and entering, assault, and violation of a restraining order. You're going to tell them it was your idea, that you acted alone, and that you're very, very sorry." "Go to hell," Derek spat. Shepard crouched down, his face close to Derek's. "Let me explain something to you. I have friends in every prison in this state, friends who owe me favors. If you go away for this, and you will go away, I can make your time very easy or very hard. Your choice." Derek's bravado faltered. Nicole saw it happen. The moment he realized he wasn't dealing with someone he could intimidate, someone he could overpower. For the first time since she'd known him, Derek looked afraid. "I have another option," Shepard continued. "You sign over your parental rights. Full custody to Nicole, no visitation, no contact. You disappear from their lives completely. In exchange, I don't make any calls. You serve your time, you get out, you never come near them again." "You can't." "I can, and I will." Shepard stood. "Think about it. You've got until the cops get here to decide." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The bikers moved with practiced efficiency, fading toward the edges of the room, making themselves look like concerned neighbors who had heard the commotion and come to help. By the time the police arrived, the scene looked almost normal. A break-in interrupted, a victim saved, nothing more complicated than that. Nicole gave her statement in a daze. She answered questions she barely heard, signed forms she barely read, watched as Derek was handcuffed and led away. He didn't look at her as he passed. He didn't say a word. When the police were gone and the apartment was quiet again, Shepard found Nicole sitting on the couch with Gracie asleep in her lap. The little girl had cried herself out and finally succumbed to exhaustion, her face still streaked with tears. "You called," Shepard said, sitting down across from her. "That was the right thing to do. I didn't know what else to do." Nicole's voice was hollow. "I didn't think you'd actually come. I didn't think anyone would. We always come." He leaned forward, his gray eyes steady. "That's what the number is for. That's what we do. Who are you?" "Really?" Shepard was quiet for a moment. The apartment was a wreck around them. Broken glass, overturned furniture, the detritus of violence. But he seemed unbothered by it, like he'd seen worse and probably had. "We're the Iron Horsemen," he said finally. "A brotherhood. We ride together, look out for each other, and look out for people who need help." He paused. "A long time ago, someone I loved was in your situation. Nobody came for her. Nobody helped. She didn't make it." Nicole felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry." "So am I. Every day." He looked at Gracie, sleeping peacefully despite everything. "After she died, I made a promise. I would never let that happen to anyone else if I could stop it. Every person we help, every door we break down, it's for her. It's to make sure her death meant something." Nicole didn't know what to say. She looked down at her daughter, at the small hands curled against her chest, at the face that looked so peaceful in sleep. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you rest. Tomorrow we figure out the next steps. You'll need a new place to live. This apartment isn't safe anymore. We can help with that. We can help with a lot of things." Shepard stood. "But tonight, you sleep. We'll have someone outside your door until morning. No one's getting in. I can't repay you for this." "We don't want repayment." He reached out and touched her shoulder, a brief gesture of comfort. "We want you to be safe. That's enough." He walked toward the door, where the other bikers were waiting. At the threshold, he turned back. "You're not alone anymore, Nicole. Whatever comes next, you've got family now. Remember that." Then they were gone, melting into the night as quickly as they'd appeared. Nicole sat on the ruined couch with her daughter in her arms and cried. Not from fear this time, but from something else. Relief. Gratitude. The overwhelming weight of realizing that, for the first time in years, someone had actually come when she called. Outside her door, she could hear the creak of leather as someone settled in for a long night. She wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The next few weeks passed in a blur of logistics and paperwork and small kindnesses that added up to something enormous. The Iron Horsemen moved fast. Within 48 hours of the break-in, Nicole and Gracie were in a new apartment, a 2-bedroom unit in a safer part of town, with a security system and a landlord who had been personally vouched for by someone Shepard knew. The rent was the same as what Nicole had been paying before, which she suspected meant someone was covering the difference. But when she tried to ask about it, Ruth, the woman with the long braid who had comforted Gracie that night, just smiled and changed the subject. The furniture came next. Nicole had left most of her things behind in the old apartment, too damaged or too tainted by what had happened to bring along. But the new place filled up quickly, a couch from one biker's garage, a kitchen table from another's storage unit, a bed for Gracie that had belonged to someone's daughter who had outgrown it. Everything was second-hand but clean, cared for, given with a generosity that made Nicole's chest ache every time she tried to thank someone. "This is too much," she told Shepard one afternoon, standing in the middle of her new living room, surrounded by boxes that other people were unpacking. "I can't accept all of this." "You already have." Shepard was carrying a box labeled "Kitchen" in blocky handwriting. He set it on the counter and turned to face her. "This is what we do, Nicole. This is who we are. You're not taking advantage of anyone. You're letting people help because they want to." "But why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "I know enough." He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, his gray eyes steady. "I know you're a mother who would die to protect her daughter. I know you spent 2 years running from a man who wanted to hurt you. I know you were alone in a grocery store, terrified, and you asked a stranger for help because you had no one else to ask." He paused. "That's enough for me. That's enough for all of us." Nicole felt the tears coming and didn't try to stop them. She'd cried more in the past 2 weeks than she had in the past 2 years. But these weren't the tears of fear or desperation. They were something else. Release, maybe. The shedding of a weight she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to let people in. Derek, he made me believe that needing help was weakness, that asking for anything made me a burden. Derek was wrong." Shepard's voice was firm. "Asking for help isn't weakness. It's courage. It takes guts to admit you can't do something alone, to trust a stranger with your safety and your daughter's safety." He pushed off the counter and walked toward her. "You did something brave that night in the grocery store, Nicole. You reached out when everything in you was screaming to run. That's not weakness. That's strength." Gracie came running into the room, her arms full of stuffed animals that someone had donated. "Mommy, look what I found. There's a bunny and a bear and a—" She stopped, noticing Nicole's tears. "Why are you crying?" Nicole knelt down and gathered her daughter into her arms. "Because I'm happy, sweetheart. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. That's what you said before." Gracie's face scrunched up with the effort of understanding. "Grown-ups are weird." Nicole laughed. A real laugh, surprising and bright, and Shepard smiled. "She's right," he said. "We are weird, but we do the best we can." The legal proceedings moved faster than Nicole had expected. Derek, facing multiple charges and the prospect of a very unpleasant incarceration, had decided to take Shepard's deal. He signed away his parental rights in a courtroom that felt too ordinary for the magnitude of what was happening, and when it was over, Nicole walked out into the sunlight with a piece of paper that said Gracie was hers, completely, permanently, irrevocably hers. Shepard was waiting outside, leaning against his motorcycle with the patience of a man who had nowhere else to be. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done." Nicole held up the papers, her hands trembling. He gave her up. "Full custody, no visitation, no contact. It's over." "How do you feel?" Nicole thought about it. She thought about the years of fear, the nights spent planning escape routes, the constant vigilance that had become so normal she'd forgotten what it felt like to relax. She thought about Gracie, who would grow up without a father, but also without the terror of wondering when he would appear. "Free," she said finally. "I feel free." Shepard nodded like he'd expected that answer. "That's a good feeling. Hold on to it. What happens now? With Derek, I mean. With everything." "Derek goes to prison for a few years. When he gets out, he'll know better than to come looking for you." The brothers made that very clear. Shepard's voice was matter of fact, carrying no threat and no apology. "As for you and Gracie, you live. You build a life. You raise that little girl to know she's loved and safe and can do anything she sets her mind to. That's it? That's the whole plan? That's the whole plan." He smiled, and the hardness in his face softened. "Complicated plans are overrated. Sometimes all you need is the simple stuff. Safety, love, a community that's got your back." He pushed off the motorcycle. "Speaking of which, there's someone who wants to meet you. If you're up for a short ride." Nicole hesitated. She'd never been on a motorcycle, had spent most of her life afraid of them, but Shepard was already holding out a helmet, and something in his expression made her want to trust him. "Gracie, Ruth got her. They're making cookies at the clubhouse. Gracie's in heaven." Nicole looked at the helmet, then at Shepard, then at the papers in her hand that represented everything she'd fought for. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." The ride was terrifying and exhilarating and unlike anything Nicole had ever experienced. She held on to Shepard's jacket as the wind rushed past, watching the world blur by, feeling something loosen in her chest that had been tight for so long she'd forgotten it could be any other way. By the time they pulled up to a small house on the outskirts of town, she was breathless and grinning. "This is it," Shepard said, cutting the engine. "Come on." The house was modest but well kept, with a porch that wrapped around two sides and a garden full of flowers that were just starting to bloom. An older woman sat on the porch swing, a blanket over her legs despite the warmth of the afternoon. Her hair was white, her face lined with years, but her eyes were sharp and bright. "Shepard." Her voice was thin but warm. "You brought her." "I did." Shepard helped Nicole up the porch steps. "Nicole, this is my mother, Eleanor Combs. She wanted to meet you." Nicole shook the woman's hand, feeling the papery skin, the delicate bones. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Combs." "Eleanor, please. Mrs. Combs was my mother-in-law, and she was a terror." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "Sit, sit. Shepard, get us some lemonade. I want to talk to this girl." Shepard disappeared into the house, and Nicole sat in the chair Eleanor indicated, a worn wooden rocker that creaked comfortably under her weight. "He told me about you," Eleanor said. "About what happened in the grocery store, about what happened after. He saved my life, him and the others. He's good at that." Eleanor's gaze drifted toward the house, where Shepard could be heard clattering around in the kitchen. "He wasn't always, you know. There was a time when he was lost, angry at the world, angry at himself, running from things he couldn't name. It took him a long time to find his way." "What changed?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. The swing creaked. A bird sang somewhere in the garden. "He lost someone," she said finally. "A woman he loved. She was in a situation like yours, trapped, afraid, unable to get help. By the time Shepard realized how bad it was too late." She paused. "After she died, he could have gone one of two ways. He could have let it destroy him, or he could have let it transform him. He chose transformation." Nicole thought about that. She thought about her own transformation, from victim to survivor, from alone to surrounded by people who cared. He started the Iron Horseman? With his father's blessing and his mother's worry. Eleanor smiled. "I've spent 30 years watching him build something that matters, watching him turn his grief into purpose. It's not the life I imagined for him, but it's a good life, a meaningful life." Shepard returned with 3 glasses of lemonade on a tray. He handed one to his mother, one to Nicole, and kept one for himself. "Telling stories about me?" he asked, settling into a chair. "Someone has to. You certainly won't." Eleanor sipped her lemonade. "I was just explaining to Nicole why you do what you do." "And what did you tell her?" The truth. Eleanor's eyes found Nicole's. That you're a good man who made something beautiful out of something terrible. That the world is better because you're in it. She paused. And that this young woman and her daughter are lucky to have found you. Nicole felt her throat tighten. I'm the lucky one. You both are. Eleanor set down her glass and reached for Nicole's hand. Her grip was stronger than it looked. The thing about luck, dear, is that it goes both ways. You give and you receive. That's how community works. That's how family works. She squeezed once, then let go. You're part of this family now. Don't forget that. Nicole looked at Shepard, at Eleanor, at the small house with its wraparound porch and its garden full of flowers. She thought about Gracie making cookies with Ruth at the clubhouse. She thought about the apartment full of second-hand furniture, given by strangers who had become something more. I won't, she said. I promise. And for the first time since she could remember, she believed it. The months that followed were the most peaceful of Nicole's life. She settled into the new apartment, hanging pictures on walls that belonged to her, arranging furniture in rooms where no one would come crashing through in the middle of the night. Gracie started at a new daycare, one recommended by Ruth, where the teachers were kind and the children were happy, and no one knew anything about the life they'd left behind. Nicole kept her job at the dental office, but something had changed. She smiled more. She talked to her coworkers, accepted invitations to lunch, started building the kind of casual friendships she'd been too afraid to cultivate before. The constant vigilance that had defined her existence began to ease, replaced by something that felt almost like normalcy. The Iron Horseman remained a steady presence in her life. Ruth stopped by, every few weeks with food or supplies, or just to check in. Tiny, the young man with the tattooed arms, who had been first through her door that night, appointed himself Gracie's unofficial protector, appearing at the apartment with toys and books and an endless supply of terrible jokes that made her daughter laugh until she snorted. Even Shepard came around occasionally, sharing coffee at the kitchen table, asking questions about how things were going, listening with the quiet attention of someone who actually cared about the answers. It wasn't just support, it was family. The kind Nicole had never had growing up, the kind she'd stopped believing existed. People who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. People who gave without expecting anything in return. 6 months after the night Derek broke into her apartment, Nicole attended her first Iron Horseman gathering. It was a cookout at the clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the edge of town that served as headquarters, community center, and gathering place for the Brotherhood. Ruth had invited her weeks ago, and Nicole had been finding excuses not to go, not ready to step fully into this new world. But Gracie had been begging to see the motorcycle people again. And finally, Nicole had run out of reasons to say no. The clubhouse was nothing like she'd expected. She'd imagined something dark and dangerous, full of the kind of people her mother had warned her about. Instead, she found a space that felt more like a community hall. Big open rooms with picnic tables and couches, walls covered with photographs and memorabilia, a kitchen that smelled like grilling meat and fresh-baked bread. And people. So many people. Men and women in leather jackets, yes, but also children running between the tables, elderly members sitting in lawn chairs telling stories, families gathered in clusters that crossed every line Nicole had been taught to draw. Overwhelmed yet? Ruth appeared beside her, holding 2 plates loaded with food. She handed one to Nicole and one to Gracie, who had been clinging to her mother's leg since they'd arrived. A little, Nicole admitted. It's a lot at first. All these people, all this noise. Ruth smiled. But give it time. You'll start to see the patterns, the families, the friendships, the connections that hold it all together. It's not as chaotic as it looks. Nicole looked around, trying to see what Ruth was describing. She watched a young man help an older woman to her seat. She watched 2 children sharing a toy, their parents deep in conversation nearby. She watched Shepard move through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and exchange words, everyone he passed lighting up a little at his presence. How did you find this place? Nicole asked. How did you become part of it? Ruth was quiet for a moment. My brother was in trouble, bad trouble, the kind that the police couldn't help with, that lawyers couldn't fix. Shepard showed up, and things changed. She shrugged. After that, I stuck around, started helping with the cookouts, the charity drives, the support work, found a family I didn't know I was looking for. And your brother? He's good. Turned his life around. owns an auto shop in Tulsa now, sponsors 2 kids through the Iron Horseman youth program. Ruth's eyes found someone across the room, a big man with a beard, laughing at something a child had said. "That's him over there, Marcus. He's the one who taught Tiny how to fix engines." Nicole watched Marcus lift the child onto his shoulders, the little girl squealing with delight. She thought about the threads that connected these people, the histories, the debts, the gratitudes that wove them together into something stronger than any of them alone. "It's like a web," she said softly. "It is." Ruth nodded. "Every person here has a story. Every story connects to a dozen others. That's what Shepherd built. Not just a club, but a community. A family that keeps growing." Gracie tugged at Nicole's hand. "Mommy, can I go play? There's a dog over there." Nicole looked where her daughter was pointing. A German shepherd lay in a patch of sunlight, surrounded by children who were taking turns petting its massive head. The dog looked patient and content, the kind of animal that had seen everything and decided most of it was worthy of napping through. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you." Gracie ran off, and Nicole watched her join the cluster of children, her initial shyness melting away as the dog licked her hand. It was the most relaxed Nicole had seen her since before the break-in, maybe longer than that. "She's going to be okay," Ruth said, following Nicole's gaze. "Kids are resilient, more resilient than we give them credit for." "I hope so. I worry about what this will do to her. Growing up knowing what her father was capable of, knowing that I couldn't protect her without help." "You did protect her?" Ruth's voice was firm. "You got her out. You kept her safe for 2 years on your own, and when you couldn't do it alone anymore, you asked for help. That's not failure, Nicole. That's wisdom." Nicole wanted to believe that. She was trying to believe it. But the voice in her head, Derek's voice, always Derek's voice, kept whispering that she was weak, dependent, a burden on people who should be living their own lives. "How do I make it stop?" she asked. "The voice that tells me I don't deserve this, that I should be able to handle everything myself." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "It takes time and work, and a lot of days where you have to choose to believe something different from what you feel." She put a hand on Nicole's arm. "I've been where you are. So has half this room. The voice doesn't go away completely, but it gets quieter, especially when you have people around you who keep telling you the truth." "And what's the truth?" "That you're strong, that you're brave, that you deserve every good thing that comes your way." Ruth squeezed her arm. "And that asking for help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart." Nicole felt the familiar sting of tears and blinked them back. She'd cried enough in the past 6 months. Today, she wanted to do something different. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for being there that night, for being here now. That's what family does." Ruth smiled. "Now come on, let me introduce you to some people. It's time you started putting names to faces." They walked through the cookout together, Ruth making introductions, Nicole shaking hands and accepting hugs from people she'd never met, but who seemed to know her story already. She met veterans and teachers, mechanics and nurses, parents and grandparents. She met people who had been helped by the Iron Horsemen and people who had done the helping, and many who had been both. By the end of the afternoon, Nicole's head was spinning with names and faces and stories. But something else had happened too, something she couldn't quite articulate. She felt different, lighter, like a piece of armor she'd been wearing so long she'd forgotten it was there had finally started to lift. Gracie found her near the dessert table, her face covered in chocolate, the dog following behind her like a furry shadow. "Mommy, this is the best day ever." She threw her arms around Nicole's legs. "Can we come back, please?" Nicole looked around the cookout, at the families gathered, the children playing, the bikers who had become her family without her quite realizing it was happening. "Yeah, baby," she said, "we can come back." And for the first time since she'd arrived, she wasn't just saying what Gracie wanted to hear. She meant it. 2 years later, on a Tuesday night that felt like any other, Nicole Tanner walked into the grocery store on Maple Street. It was the same store where everything had started, where she'd stood in the canned goods aisle, counting her last dollars, praying that Gracie's father wouldn't find them. She hadn't been back since that night. For a long time, she'd avoided it entirely, taking a longer route to a different store, rather than face the memories that clung to those fluorescent-lit aisles. But tonight was different. Tonight, she'd driven here on purpose. Gracie was at Ruth's house, having a sleepover with Ruth's granddaughter, a friendship that had blossomed over the past 2 years and showed no signs of slowing down. Nicole had the evening to herself, a rare luxury that still felt strange after so many years of constant vigilance. She'd planned to come here, to walk through the store, to prove to herself that the past was really finally behind her. The automatic doors slid open and she stepped inside. The store looked the same, the humming lights, the linoleum floors, the rows of products stretching toward the back. She walked slowly, deliberately, letting herself feel whatever came up. There was anxiety, yes, a flutter in her chest, a quickening of her pulse, but it was muted now, manageable, not the crushing terror that had defined that night 2 years ago. She walked to the canned goods aisle and stopped. This was where she'd been standing when she'd heard Derek's voice. This was where she'd frozen, trapped, certain that her story was about to end in the worst possible way. And this was where she'd met Shepard. She stood there for a long moment, letting the memories wash over her. The fear, the desperation, the moment when she'd looked at a stranger in a leather jacket and whispered the words that had changed everything. Please help us. Such small words, such an enormous leap of faith. You okay, ma'am? Nicole turned. A young employee was watching her, concern on his face, probably wondering why a woman was standing motionless in the canned goods aisle at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I'm fine, she said, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, it was true. Just remembering something. She finished her shopping, actual shopping this time, filling a cart with food she could afford, food that would make meals for a daughter who was thriving, and drove home to an apartment that felt like safety. The next morning, she went to the Iron Horseman Clubhouse. She'd been coming regularly for 2 years now, helping with the cookouts, volunteering at charity events, slowly becoming part of the fabric of the community that had saved her life. But today was different. Today, she had a purpose. Shepard was in his office, a small room at the back of the warehouse that was cluttered with papers and photographs and the accumulated evidence of 30 years of building something that mattered. He looked up when she knocked on the open door. Nicole, come in. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she'd sat a dozen times before, talking through problems and plans and the slow work of rebuilding a life. I want to help, she said without preamble. Really help, not just volunteering at cookouts, but the real work. The work you did for me. Shepard studied her. His gray eyes were as steady as they'd been that first night, carrying the same mix of assessment and compassion that had made her trust him when she had no reason to trust anyone. What kind of help are you thinking? The crisis work, the people who call in the middle of the night, scared and alone and not knowing where to turn. Nicole leaned forward. I've been there, Shepard. I know what it feels like, and I know that sometimes the person who helps you needs to be someone who understands. It's hard work, emotionally draining. You'll hear stories that keep you up at night. I know. You'll have to be available when people need you, not when it's convenient. Middle of the night, middle of dinner, middle of your daughter's birthday party. I know. And you'll fail sometimes. You'll do everything right, and it still won't be enough. People will slip through the cracks despite your best efforts. Nicole thought about that. She thought about the nights she'd spent alone in her old apartment, praying for someone to help her, wondering if anyone in the world cared whether she and Gracie lived or died. She thought about the moment Shepard had appeared in that grocery store aisle, the moment everything had changed. I know, she said again, but it's better than doing nothing. It's better than walking past when I should stop. Shepard's expression shifted. Something that might have been pride flickered in his eyes. You've been ready for a while, he said. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. You were waiting for me to ask. That's how it works. We don't recruit. We don't pressure. People come to us when they're ready and not before. He stood and walked around the desk. Ruth's been running our crisis response for 15 years. She could use a partner, someone who knows the work from the inside, who can connect with the people we're trying to help. I'd like that. Good. Shepard extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Nicole, officially. She shook his hand, feeling the calluses, the strength, the steadiness that had been there from the very beginning. Thank you, she said, for everything, for that night in the grocery store, for coming when I called, for giving me a chance to be more than a victim. You were never just a victim. Shepard's voice was firm. You were always a survivor. I just helped you see it. The training started the next week. Nicole learned about crisis intervention, about de-escalation, about the legal landscape of restraining orders and custody battles, and the 1,000 ways the system failed the people it was supposed to protect. She learned the Iron Horsemen's protocols, how they responded to calls, how they coordinated with law enforcement, how they provided ongoing support to the families they helped. And she learned the stories, story after story of people who had been where she'd been, trapped, afraid, alone, and who had found their way out because someone had stopped when they should have walked past. Her first crisis call came 3 months later. It was 2 a.m. A woman named Melissa, voice shaking, children crying in the background. Her husband had come home drunk, had put his fist through the wall, had promised that next time it would be her face. She was hiding in the bathroom with her 2 kids, and she didn't know what to do. Nicole talked her through it. Calm voice, clear instructions, the steady presence that Shepard had been for her 2 years ago. She coordinated with the brothers who were closest, Tiny and Marcus, already en route, and stayed on the line until they arrived. When it was over, when Melissa and her children were safe at the Iron Horsemen's shelter house, Nicole sat in her kitchen and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of what she'd just done. She'd been the voice on the other end of the phone. She'd been the help that someone had called for in their darkest moment. She understood now why Shepard did this, why Ruth did it, why all of them gave their time and their energy and their sleep to a cause that would never be finished. Because every person they saved was proof that the world could be better. Every family they protected was a victory against the darkness. Every chain of kindness that started with one small act, a meal, a phone call, a whispered plea for help, rippled outward in ways they would never fully see. Gracie found her the next morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee. "Mommy, are you okay?" Nicole pulled her daughter into her lap. 6 years old now, gap-toothed and curious, and so full of life, it made Nicole's heart ache. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Better than okay. What were you doing last night? I heard you talking on the phone." Nicole thought about how to explain it, how to tell a 6-year-old about the work she did, the people she helped, the way one moment of kindness could change everything. "Do you remember the story I told you?" she asked. "About the night we met Shepard? When I was scared and I asked a stranger for help and he came?" Gracie nodded solemnly. She'd heard the story many times, an age-appropriate version, edited for her young ears, but true in all the ways that mattered. "Last night, someone else needed help. A mommy like me, with kids like you. And I got to be the person who answered. I got to help them the way Shepard helped us." Gracie's eyes went wide. "You're a hero? Like Shepard?" Nicole laughed, surprised by the word. "I don't know about hero, but I'm trying to help. That's all any of us can do." "I think you're a hero." Gracie wrapped her arms around Nicole's neck. "The best hero." Nicole held her daughter close, feeling the small heart beating against her own. She thought about the grocery store on Maple Street, the canned goods aisle, the moment she'd whispered those 3 words to a stranger. "Please help us." Such small words, such an enormous leap of faith. And now, 2 years later, she was the one answering that call. She was the one showing up when people needed her most. She was part of something bigger than herself, a chain of kindness that stretched back through Shepard and Ruth and everyone who had come before, and forward through all the people she would help in the years to come. The past was behind her. The fear was fading, and the future, for the first time in her life, looked like something worth running toward instead of away from. Nicole kissed her daughter's forehead and set her down. "Come on," she said. "Let's make pancakes. And then maybe we'll go visit Ruth and Shepard. There's a cookout this weekend, and I think someone promised to teach you how to ride a motorcycle." Gracie's face lit up. "Really? A real motorcycle? A very small, very slow, very safe motorcycle. With training wheels." "Motorcycles don't have training wheels, Mommy." "This one does. Tiny built it special." They made pancakes together, mother and daughter, in an apartment that felt like home. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere across town, the Iron Horsemen were waking up, getting ready for another day of building something that mattered. And Nicole Tanner, survivor, mother, hero, was ready to join them. She'd whispered for help once in a grocery store aisle to a stranger she didn't know. Now she was the one answering, and she would keep answering, for as long as there were voices crying out in the darkness, for as long as there were people who needed someone to stop when the world walked past. That was the promise. That was the purpose. That was what it meant to be family.